Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Powering Projects, the Technologies and Tools that Push Productivity, brought to you by Lenovo and Intel. My name is John Feld, and I'll be your moderator today. I would now like to introduce our panelists. Richard Panos, AIA CCM, is the Director of Construction Management in the Southern California office of Anser Advisory, which specializes in capital program funding, program management, project management, construction management, and executive advisory services. He is also currently serving as the Visiting Certified Construction Manager for the Construction Management Association of America. Chris Ruffo, Worldwide Segment Manager, Architecture, Engineering, and Product Development at Lenovo. Thank you for joining us today, gentlemen. And let's walk through our agenda. First, we'd like to set a baseline. How have technology and mobility impacted project workflow? How technologies and tools have pushed the capabilities and configurations that help optimize these tools, and the innovations that we're going to be seeing on the horizon. First, let's set that baseline. Chris, how has technology impacted project workflows during the past decade?
Hey, thanks for the introduction. From my perspective, I think it all starts with the advent and the adoption of BIM, or Building Information Modeling, workflows across the entire building sector. BIM has really helped us kind of shift from 2D drawings to a coordinated model-based system where the architect, designer, engineer, contractor, and even the owner can work from a single model that contains everything across the design, from the design detail itself to structural to MEP to scheduling data. It's all in a central location, and everybody benefits from a single source of truth. So you hear about BIM, you hear about integrated project delivery. I think for me, this has been the starting point for the shift in technology over the past decade.
And you've also noted that that single source sort of improves communication, scheduling, construction waste across every project.
Yes.
Rick, what about your standpoint on technology?
Well, I think it probably sounds a little funny, but it's both improved the process and also has complicated it. It's improved it that we have a better way to capture the information, because we deal with so much information, so much data, but it's important certainly be able to organize that information and have it available to you. But then you also have the need to adapt to the speed of technology. As Chris was describing, it's being developed. It moves quicker than you can just understand and learn. And I think that I'm not different from other construction managers who acknowledge that we need to embrace the technology, but it can be a challenge.
Yep, I think that's true for anyone on any project. Let's address mobility. And Chris, how has mobility changed project management during, say, the past 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, sure. As a workstation hardware provider, we've seen the overall AEC sector change significantly over the last decade. Over a decade, architects were more desk-bound. They had to rely on larger hardware to run the software they needed to get their job done. We didn't have cell phones that are as powerful today. We didn't have networks that are as powerful as they are today. We didn't have tablets that are as powerful as they are today. And today, what we're seeing, because of new technology that's shrunk down hardware, teams tend to reconfigure based on projects. So at the office spaces have adapted to allow for this. And hardware has followed suit. Architects kind of move from project to project, desk to desk more fluidly. They move from their desk to the boardroom, to the client office, to the job site. And mobile workstations have emerged that offer similar performance to desktop solutions, but in a much smaller, lighter form factor. And many small and medium-sized businesses have moved to these mobile workstations. When they're at their desk, they typically plug into dual 24-inch monitors, and when they're on the go, they have a high-quality 15-inch mobile screen that has enough power to run virtually anything they need to do, from Revit to Lumion to Navisworks. And, even the last few years, we've seen things shift from large, heavy 17-inch workstations that people would take into the field to slimline 15 inches that are much more portable, just as powerful, and much easier to manage today.
Yeah, and Rick, you kind of echo those comments about the physical properties of machines.
Oh, absolutely. It's been about a move from the heavier, bulkier laptops to increasingly lighter, smaller notebooks, and certainly the tablets. And you know, this has all taken place in the last decade between the lighter and smaller equipment, being able to input and transmit data, and just, I mean, our cell phones are such a device that just makes it easier when you get out in the field. You know, that coupled with the speed of accuracy of communication between everyone on a project, it's just removed a lot of the traditional project bottlenecks.
So it's a combination, not just that we talked a lot about form factor, but you do bring up the speed and accuracy, and of course the removal of any barriers. As far as meeting changing client demands, certainly technology has served that end as well. And Rick, from your experience, how have client and project demands changed during the past few years?
Well, they all know about the this additional technology, and so you know, they expect us to be able to deliver that, and you got to be able to have the capture, the data speed. Better technology means that we know that we have to have that available and know it, so that when we're discussing things with the client, that they're getting that. It gives them greater speed to the data, improved accuracy, and better quality overall.
And I think we come from a place where it used to be speed, price, quality, pick two, and now that is indeed the demand. And mirroring client demands, Chris, are client expectations, which are a little bit different. Can you explain that part of it?
Yeah, I think I can open this with a short story from a customer that I spoke to a few years back in the Boston area. He's an SMB firm, focuses in on a wide range of projects from education to healthcare. And he said to me, you know, if my kid can sit on the couch with a VR headset and play a game with his friend across town, why can't I use this technology to visualize my $800 million hospital? You know, and fast forward a few years, the answer today, of course, is now we can. And I think what this story illustrates is how much of our world in AEC is influenced by what happens in other media. So the impacts of the film and game industries have had on client expectations. And we're seeing now that AEC workflows now adopt many of these tools, talents, techniques from the media and entertainment industry. And, you know, VR is commonplace today throughout the entire process to experience a project before it's real, either at the desktop or at the client's office or on the job site. And, you know, we know the benefits include making critical decisions early on in the process, you know, where they're less costly to fix, public involvement, VR to visualize construction staging, clash detection. I think many clients now expect lifelike visualization as part of the design process, and you know, architects to contractors can, you know, now render today with a click of a button using easy-to-use tools like Lumion, Navisworks, or others. And you know, even with a little bit more effort, we can see architects can produce those cinematic quality visualizations. Lifelike is what we see in our favorite Hollywood films and television commercials. And, you know, this visualization, I think the important part, it's no longer a pretty picture. We're actually seeing the ability to make high quality visualizations that are based around physically based light, where people can make real decisions in real time, and the stakeholders can trust the results because it's physically based. In the past, some of these quality renderings could take days or even weeks to do, and now it's been, you know, accelerated to near real time.
And not only that, the accuracy of the rendering is pretty amazing at this stage in the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to discuss communications to a degree, and there's sort of two sides of it. And Chris, what is the role of communications sort of from your perspective?
Well, I think we've seen some CAD vendors adopt social media-like tools within their software packages. Autodesk has it in something called Fusion, which is a product development tool, but also within BIM 360. I know that many customers deal with issues around file storage, project archiving, permissions of who can access what, either within a company or with the client themselves. Some firms have adopted their own solutions, rolled their own. Others use tools from Autodesk, etc. But it's starting to have a profound impact on how customers connect with one another.
And when we're talking about communications, Rick, you look at it a little differently. You're going to address the issue through the prism of best practices. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. The communications within a construction environment is important to have and be able to have open communications. When you get down to written communication, I come from the old school that it was traditional that you wrote letters and you were very cautious on how you wrote it. With the advent of email and texting and even social media, with email especially, it's easy to write an email and then quickly push send. I don't know how many people get emails where there's misspellings or grammar and all that stuff, but they just quickly do it. You say the wrong thing and it's going to come back and bite you, and it'll do that, and it'll be used against you in a court of law if you say the wrong thing. So just because you delete that email, also, it does not mean that it is gone. It's on a server somewhere, and lawyers will find them through discovery. So we got to be extra cautious. As far as texting goes, that's even a tougher medium to deal with for clarity. Between the short phrasing and acronyms that everybody uses, there's plenty opportunity for misunderstanding. And it doesn't convey emotion the way it is. I mean, when you bold something, sometimes that tends to be treated in a different way. But texting is a tough one. Like emails, texts are discoverable, and just because you delete them on the phone doesn't mean that they don't reside on a server somewhere else or on someone else's phone because you're texting with somebody else. Social media now, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or any of the other platforms, it's still a means to be able to put information out there, and you can oftentimes say the wrong thing, and the whole world hears about it, and it becomes the truth if you've said the wrong thing. So you have to be very, very careful with what you put on electronic media.
Yeah, well, the landscape is certainly littered with cautionary tales. One thing that we have seen is a rise in tools and technology that really aid in productivity. And of those in the most recent years, Chris, which in your view are the most important and why?
Well, we talked about BIM above. I think the big challenges now better tie the overall construction process and operation and maintenance of a building or structure to the BIM model itself. From Autodesk, we've seen things like BIM 360 and AutoCAD 360 that enable folks who work in the field to connect to the BIM model that's centrally located in the cloud. So they can work, for example, on the model by providing comments and markups in the field that get sent over to architects and engineers back in the office for update. So there's an overall, I think this connected world of devices, whether it be on the desktop, mobility, cell phones, tablets, etc., have the potential to improve coordination on the job site, safety, overall site management, and operation and maintenance of facilities. I think we talk about some other trends below, VR, AR, and AI. But now, I think we touched on this earlier too, most CAD apps have VR workflows built in via plugins. We've seen photogrammetry and laser scanning having a huge impact on AEC, everything from historical preservation to renovation and retrofit. The ability to scan existing structures that don't have any documentation, aid the ability to create BIM documents for historical buildings and structures, or infrastructure for that matter. And tools like AutoCAD and Revit and Bentley all have solutions built in that deal with point cloud workflows to help translate that data, whether it's point cloud data or photogrammetry, to be able to translate it into a BIM model. We're also seeing things like drones, robots equipped that can go through and scan site conditions on a daily basis. It's enabling, architects, contractors to verify what they're building actually meets the design spec and deal with any variances or clashes early on in the process.
Chris started with BIM, and Rick, you've noted that BIM and 3D modeling have served to resurrect the industry in some way. Given that you have some 47 years experience that you bring to the table, can you explain that perspective for us?
Yeah, when I first started in this business, it goes back to the days when I was a draftsman on a drawing board, and we were doing stuff ink on linen. And when you're doing that type of drawing method, you had to make sure that when you put something down on paper, that it was correct. It made you think through the process. And we didn't have computers back then for us to play with or do whatever it was. My first recollection of CAD was when I was with an architectural firm that developed their own CAD software. But back then they were using a mainframe platform. It was a big room on our floor, and it was pretty amazing what it took to drive CAD back then. Then CAD started to develop, and it was all the earlier CAD was a 2D modeling method, which really was just a drawing tool. That's all it was. And it unfortunately caused the industry to I'm not going to say stop, but it got them to not be thinking as much about the details behind what was going into it. It was too easy for them to just go in and say, oh, I can just cut and paste this from another project and it'll work on this project. So it lost that thinking. So quality of documentation started to go downhill. But now we've got the coming up of 3D drafting, 3D modeling, which is the BIM process, building information modeling. And in that environment, you're really literally putting together a building. It's actually full size in the computer, and you're putting it together piece by piece, which means that you have to think about, does it all fit? Does it all work? And it's not just with buildings. It's with other parts and pieces of the construction industry as well. But the 3D modeling is forcing everybody to think about the parts and pieces and making sure that it really does work. And you can't just take a detail and apply it because the computer's going to look at it and say, wait a second, this doesn't fit. And you'll get errors in it and so forth. So the quality is getting better because we have now the BIM, which is this 3D environment. In fact, I've had contractors tell me that if a project was not developed in BIM environment, that they would redraw it into the BIM environment, into a 3D environment, because they use it for coordination on the construction and make sure their subcontractors are looking at the whole space that they have, make sure everything is going to fit prior to starting construction. It absolutely saves rework and related costs to that rework.
Thank you, Rick. And along with advances on the software and application side, certainly we've seen an evolution in workstations. And Chris, we'll lean on you a little bit. How have workstations evolved during the past few years in terms of power and capability?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, on the mobile side, we've seen workstations get lighter, thinner, faster, more reliable over the past decade. We've seen screen resolution change significantly from, screens with very coarse resolution to UHD, and even OLED panels now that have extremely good contrast ratios and resolution. So you can see an extraordinary amount of detail in high fidelity. They cover the entire RGB gamut, Adobe RGB gamut. And, thanks to, our friends at Intel, components like processors have become much more efficient, faster, they run cooler, and that's enabled us to put a lot more power into a smaller form factor. The same with graphics cards, memory, and all of this has allowed for a more streamlined design. And as a hardware manufacturer, we take a lot of pride in what we do. There's an awful lot of engineering that goes into creating a mobile workstation, from managing the cooling, sound, acoustics, comfort, durability, form factor. So when you actually pop open the hood of some of our desktop and mobile workstations, you see a significant amount of energy that goes into to cooling. You see materials that are lightweight and durable. You see a lot of our solutions that are mil-spec tested, et cetera, et cetera. So I think from a hardware perspective, all the change in the technology allows us to be able to create a better product that's thinner and lighter.
And what should people look for in-office and mobile workstation capabilities and configuration, Chris?
That's another good question, and one that we get asked all the time. And I think it's horses for courses. One has to start with an understanding of what they want to do. Do I need to be mobile? Do I need to be desktop bound? And I think it's important to look at the software solutions that you need to run and the gamut of those solutions. If you're doing 2D CAD, 3D BIM, and visualization, you're going to require a certain type of machine that covers a range of workflows. And we want to see that a machine has been ISV certified to run the applications that you're looking at, Revit, for example, Bentley, others. And from there, you look at a balance of durability, reliability, weight, form factors, ergonomics, all of this plays a role. And in terms of configuration, I think the most important consideration is that we're dealing with CAD applications that are single-threaded, and they require high clock speeds to get the most out of the applications that we're running. So that, in the mobile side, that typically means a Xeon processor. On the desktop, there are a couple of options from Intel as well that range from the Core i to the Xeons, depending on the format that you're looking at. Good graphics are important, RAM and storage, and we want to be looking at processors that have a clock speed, between 4 and 4.7. Cores are less important to CAD apps. If you've got 4 to 6 cores, that's usually enough for the CAD app itself. The next important factor is graphics performance. You can never get the most out of your graphics card unless your processor is up to the task. Is the two communicate with each other on the bus. The NVIDIA Quadro P2000 is a good place to start, and moving up from there, depending on what you're doing. RAM is critically important as well. Many architects are working with large bin data sets. 32 gigabytes is what I hear is standard from a lot of practices, and larger firms will go up to 64 if they're working on very, very large projects. And last but not least, fast storage is really important for loading and saving these BIM data locally. And most workstations come outfitted with NVMe drives. They're about 10 times faster than traditional spinning drives. So those that's kind of a high-level overview of some of the things to consider when choosing a workstation for BIM and CAD.
And we'll point out that another issue to consider is that of security. Intel and Lenovo collaborate to offer robust security solutions to address threats to devices, online activity, identity, and data. Many capabilities are available out of the box, with others delivered via third-party software or services. The Intel vPro platform and Lenovo ThinkShield work together to help protect your device by hardening it against it and detecting security attacks by using Intel Hardware Shield, Intel Transparent Supply Chain, and Intel Active Management technology. They protect your online experiencing by encrypting transmissions, detecting suspicious networks, and by sandboxing potentially dangerous downloads through Intel Wi-Fi 6 radios and Intel threat detection technology. They protect your identity by replacing passwords with secure, convenient multi-factor authentication through Intel Authenticate solution, and they protect your data by encrypting and backing it up, securely wiping it, and detecting ransomware by using Intel Pro SSDs and Intel Remote Data Erase. Finally, let's talk about what's coming up on the horizon. And Chris, how might technology help power productivity going forward?
Yeah, this is a great question, and thanks, John, for raising ThinkShield. That's an important part of the overall mix when we look at security. This is kind of my favorite part of the conversation. I think there are huge changes on the horizon. You know, BIM is entrenched. It's universally understood and acknowledged as being a productive part of the design and building workflow. I think what we're seeing is there's tremendous change with the next generation of VR headsets that are going to provide an ultra HD experience, you know, which is really important for those in practice and clients who want the most lifelike experiences. So this new breed of headset, AR and VR, are going to place even greater demands on workstation hardware. AR is gaining momentum, mixed reality, and you know, this is going to enable stakeholders to see proposed design elements over existing site conditions, often at a one-to-one scale. And these things are extremely important to clients for public involvement, for job site management, scheduling, coordination, etc. It's going to have, you know, an even greater impact, I think, than the experiences that we're seeing today with AR and VR. Yeah, another favorite topic of mine is what we call the convergence of manufacturing and construction. And you know, in the building sector as a whole, additive manufacturing is gaining momentum. We all know about subtractive printing, CNCing. That's been around for a while, but the additive piece is gaining momentum. And we're now seeing, you know, smaller projects where it's being entirely fabricated, being manufactured, if you will, and even components being developed that would allow for a sort of made-to-order workflow. In some cases, these materials are recyclable, made from environmentally friendly sources. We've got a customer we've been working with called Actual that actually has developed a catalog of 3D building products, you know, door frames, moldings, floors, et cetera, all made from this sustainably friendly material that I talked about earlier. It's actually a linseed oil-based plant product. What this means, as fabrication becomes more integral to the building process, less waste, projects are more efficient, it can be better managed on site. And I think one of our favorite stories is around MX3D, who's doing the world's first 3D printed pedestrian bridge in Amsterdam. They finished printing it. They developed technology to not only print stainless steel, but they developed code to be able to tell the robots how to print this stainless steel material in free space. They've used everything from generative design to robots to machine learning and IoT to kind of bring this project to life. And I think the latest aspect of this is sensor networks. being integrated into building products. MX3D is, for example, wiring this bridge with an array of sensors, accelerometers, displacement, temperature, cameras. So the bridge will, in effect, have a nervous system built into it that understands precisely what's happening to it in real time. That data is being collected and analyzed, which will help them build smarter structures in the future, and it's also going to enable them to verify that the design is performing to spec, to as built, and help predict potential failure rates in the future. Another cool example is robotics. We were at a conference a couple weeks back where Boston Dynamics and React Robotics presented dog bots. These are robots. They're dog robots that actually can go through a construction site and perform a specific task. They're not driven. They're actually performed to go through and do certain tasks. It could be scanning a site every evening to verify what's been built. It can be picking up tools and putting them back in place. I think there's a myriad of opportunity for robotics in the construction space.
They are independently programmed to do those scans?
They can be independently programmed to perform a certain task. They are self-aware. They know how to climb stairs, navigate through a space by seeing what's happening around them.
It's like a Roomba with a brain.
Yeah.
Exciting.
And aside from these advances, Rick, what do you see in the future?
Well, as Chris describes some of the deep dive going into future technology, one of the things that's on the horizon that I really, truly see happening is a paperless environment. As much as we're doing more and more on workstations and laptops and tablets and even on our phones, we still live in a paper world. I've got a table outside my office. It's probably got 6 inches of paper sitting on it from drawings and so forth. So at some point between BIM, 3D printing, the power of these devices and so forth, that we'll only be using electronic data. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of how and when.
So at some point we may all be looking at on-site holograms. Who knows?
And it very well could be that.
Thank you both, Chris and Rick. Appreciated the conversation. We do have a few questions from folks in the audience. And we'll start with Chris. Somebody asked, you talked about the best configurations a few slides ago. Were those specific to architects and contractors, or is there anything you'd add to that?
They are specific to architects, engineers, and contractors. Most of the solutions that folks in the building sector are going to be using are based around BIM, and they're solid-based modeling solutions. They're single-threaded, so the most important thing to consider in the hardware spec is the processor. You want the fastest clock speed available to you, so it's going to run your CAD applications as smoothly as possible. And then from there, selecting your graphics card to scale to the type of work that you're doing. If you're working in just BIM, with Revit or Bentley or some of the other solutions, then a Quadro P2000 card is going to work just fine. If you need to scale up to do VR, then you have to step up the stack. If you're doing rendering, the RTX 4000 card is a good place to start. We spoke about RAM again. 32 gigabytes is a good place. It's a good safe bet. It'll work with less, 16 in many cases, but 32 is a good place. You want to make sure that RAM is also balanced across the DIMM slots, so you have the same value of RAM in each DIMM slot. So if there's 4 and you want 32, that's 8 per slot. And then last but not least is your storage. You want to make sure that you have an internal NVMe drive that you boot from, and that you run your major applications from, because that's going to allow the fastest start time and reading and writing of projects. And then from there, it's around your form factor and choosing the right form factor to do what you need to do.
And we have a related question to that, Chris, is how do you foresee RTX graphic cards impacting workflows?
The RTX, there's a lot that's been said about the new NVIDIA cards, and it's extremely important. I think looking at the config, as I said, you want to make sure you get your Intel processor right first, and then you choose your graphics card to suit. And if you are looking at real-time rendering or VR, the RTX cards are extremely important. We have a mobile that will now take up to an RTX 5000 graphics card, which was unheard of just a few weeks ago. You could only do something like that in a 15 or 17 inch, and now we've been able to engineer it into a 15-inch mobile workstation. But the RTX cards will certainly help with real-time based visualization if you're using a game engine like Epic or Unity, or advanced VR types of workflows.
And Rick, at one point early on, you discussed BIM and its many advantages, but you said that it saves rework and related costs. Somebody is asking, how does it do that?
How does it save the rework? Because well, first of all, from a construction side, which is where the rework becomes a bigger cost factor, they're able to piece together the actual parts and pieces of the building into a BIM model and know that it's going to fit up in a ceiling space is so typical of where there oftentimes just not enough space in there to be able to fit all the parts and pieces that are required to go up there. So they're able to put it together, and I have seen it more times than not that they start juggling the pieces around, but they're doing it in the computer and not doing it after they've started to install it. On the converse side with the architects, I said it before, BIM makes the architects have to think in a three-dimensional model or three-dimensional format, as opposed to the older versions of a 2D where they're not really seeing it and visualizing it in 3D. Knowing that it's going together in the computer, then you get a better sense that whatever the design is that you're doing is going to work, and you don't have to go in and do the rework. Of course, BIM, even as much as 2D CAD could do it, but it does it even better in coming up with clash detection. You've designed something, you can go through the BIM process in your model and ask it to do clash detection, and it's going to tell you right away where you've got different elements of a building running into other elements, and it tells you where you need to fix it, and you can do it again before it gets out into the field.
Thank you, Rick. One more note. As product experts, we at Lenovo and Intel spend a lot of time talking to those of you in the field, and there's a common thread to the pain points we hear you identify over and over again. You need greater performance, power, flexibility, reliability, and security. We can build a tech solution customized to meet those and other needs. Just bring us your use case and we'll build your solution. Our devices aren't built just to handle your current needs, but to scale and grow with your business. To learn more about finding the right computing solution for your business, visit solutions.lenovo.com/workstations. Thank you, Chris and Rick, for a great conversation today, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. On behalf of all of us at Lenovo and Intel, have a great day.